Hi, everybody. This is Aaron Meyers, CDO of Ishmael Interactive, and we are here on our speaker series today, joined by Traci DiMartini. Traci, introduce yourself and tell us what you're up to.
Hey, Aaron. It's first off, thank you so much to you and Anna for inviting me on the podcast.
Absolutely.
I had the chance to meet Aaron a couple years ago when I was the Chief Human Capital Officer at GSA, which was a great job. And then I moved over to the IRS where I was doged on March 3rd, 2025. So, like tens of thousands of other really highly qualified, super smart, civic minded, passionate civil servants, I did a career pivot that was totally unexpected. So I moved back to Philadelphia and I'm doing a little consulting while I decide what I want to be when I grow up again.
Awesome. I love it. I love it. So, Traci, uh, I brought you on this podcast because you're really good at the people component, and that's a part of design and customer
You.
experience that people miss. They work up these solutions and they forget there's actual human beings there.
Yeah.
And as part of my due diligence, I looked at your LinkedIn, went so many pages deep, and one of the things that caught my eye was your tagline is human capital change agent. This is very different than how most people who have had your positions sort of label themselves. They usually just go chief human capital officer or
Mhm.
something like that. But when I see human capital change agent, that's kind of a philosophy. Can you tell us more about why you chose those words?
Sure. I mean, I think first off, it is so important to always keep people at the center of your decision making in business or anything you do. And I am on a mission. The one thing that will not change in the second half of my career is I will continue to be on a mission to remind employers and anyone that's listening how important the people are to achieving your mission, your goals, and your success. The change agent piece is because people forget it's also a change in mindset, culture, climate, and every decision that is made that impacts employees needs to be clearly communicated and give people that time to get comfortable with it, to ask questions, to be transparent. I think that's where I have found most of my success, whether I was leading smaller agencies as the Chico, like Peace Corps and EEOC, or even when I jumped back into the large pool like GSA and IRS. The recipes are very much the same. It's just whether you need to scale up or scale down. And, change management is central to everything we do in every sector. And I think that the human capital office is really the one to drive that because so much of it depends on how people are feeling, how they're thinking, what they want to do. And that's where I've been fortunate to find success.
I like it. I like it. It makes me think of how I sell myself as a product manager because usually people ask, okay, so you're running requirements for a product. How do you do this? And the first thing I try to bring up is, well, it's got to work for all the people, not just the customer, because they're all customers, including
That's
the
right.
people on the inside who have to do a job. Um, so you start with a logic model, and the first thing you do is, well, who are the people?
Right.
Always
And that
important.
is such a great example because I remember when I was at USDA and I was asked to come in and help with the migration to a newer version of a payroll system. The one thing that was glaringly obvious to me is like the design and the testing was all done without payroll specialists actually sitting there. Right. So they were wondering, and there were assumptions made that people just don't like change or they don't want to do this or they're being difficult. And it's like, actually, no, they're angry because you came up with a solution to problems that didn't exist. It's almost
Right.
like they wanted, in fact, I used to say that often, sometimes when I was at GSA in jest to my senior staff. We would get all these great ideas from people, which are great. I want communication, but sometimes, particularly leadership, they would come up with these great ideas and want us to get behind something. And we're like, that is actually not at all the issue.
Right.
And I don't know, sometimes I think that's just the hazard of working in an environment that can be political.
Yeah.
But that is something I do agree with you 100%. Like you actually have the people that are going to use the product, get the buy-in up front because you also don't know what ideas they're going to give you or feedback that could make it an even better product.
Right, right. So you brought up some parts of your background, and looking at your resume, I saw Peace Corps and I saw IRS.
Yes.
You could not imagine two more different federal agencies than Peace Corps and IRS if I tried. But yet you're this common bridge between the two. What's the secret sauce that you're looking for, the thing that's in common that makes each one special? Because I know you,
Yeah.
and I know if there's not something special to believe in, you're gone.
Right. And to me, that is such a great question. And I tell everyone now that I'm in retired Fed, and I should say a forced retired Fed, it's about people that enter public service. Everyone is very passionate about the mission they serve at an agency at any point in time. So I had the privilege of when I was at Peace Corps, I was working for a director. Her name was Jody Olson. Jody was one of the first Peace Corps volunteers ever in the 1960s.
Really?
And she came in and out of government a lot, typically on political appointments. But the thing that never changed about her was her commitment to Peace Corps, the Peace Corps mission of global peace and friendship and understanding, and just her excitement about getting other new volunteers excited about serving. Now, you would think the IRS is a completely different animal, but you know what the IRS also showed me? People that work there that were lifelong IRS employees really cared. They cared about bringing in revenue for the United States. They cared about talking to taxpayers about their problems. And they cared about generating ideas that would make the payment of taxes, the distribution of funds more easy and equitable in terms of let's make sure we're getting in and helping. And one example I give is when I was at the IRS, they had a program called Walk in Your Shoes, which executives had the privilege of working with frontline staff at service centers
Really?
or at the
I like
walk-in
that.
centers. And you really got a firsthand look at how our frontline staff, what they dealt with every day, whether it was antiquated IT equipment, of course, no fault of their own, or the problems that maybe the confusing tax laws would, put upon citizens that really wanted to do the right thing. They were just overwhelmed and confused. To even just watching them have the patience to go through records and make sure people got the refund they had been waiting for or were able to resolve an issue. I think that's the common denominator in every agency I worked at is people that work in the federal government truly want to serve, and you leave them in a place long enough, they're going to get excited about the mission because it's very contagious. I mean, you and I worked at GSA, which I
Right.
have to say is probably the least sexiest agency I worked for. How do you
General
explain to people, right?
services. Right.
We do procurement, we have real estate, we talk about
Right.
technology, but the number of highly intelligent, committed, passionate civil servants I met there
It's
still is
amazing.
one of the high points in my career.
Yeah, yeah. And I like this thing you're bringing up of walking in shoes because I was Peace Corps myself, 2008,
Oh,
2009 Honduras.
nice. Thank you for your
And
service.
I think in more than any other place I've ever worked, that place had the bosses that were very practical about what the job would be for the volunteers.
Right.
Yeah. So
You can't sell people a pipe
yeah.
dream. You got to be
Yes.
realist and guess. And there's this myth. I think this is one of the things that's made me most angry the past year is this myth that public servants don't want to work hard. When really anyone that has served in public service, whether it be as a volunteer or a career public servant, you will meet people that know how to get stuff done with incredible obstacles and very few resources.
Oh,
I mean, the Peace
absolutely.
Corps is a great illustration of that, but people really care and want to focus on solutions, and they won't just take no as an answer.
Right. Right. No, that's true. So you are now doing consulting in sort of the same space, I
Mhm.
believe.
Yeah,
But you've had your finger on the pulse for a while. You've been a senior executive in human resources for quite a while.
9 years. Yeah.
Yes. And
Yeah.
you're the change agent. We are going through tremendous change. Where do you see what's the forecast for the people who are just coming out of college or considering public service for the first time? Because
Oh, I love.
you
Yeah.
don't just have to be a Fed. There's a lot of ways to serve the public.
Absolutely.
So
Local, state government, nonprofits. I tell everyone, first off, the career I had in the federal service was an absolute honor and one of the greatest accomplishments of my life. I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. I wish it had ended differently. I wish it had ended on my terms. But I will still continue to advocate and fight for people to become civil servants. Perhaps they should wait until there's a new administration, because I wouldn't want anyone to come into this atmosphere and think this is how we are often treated, and this is acceptable. So I would encourage people to think about, what do you want to do before maybe you send that application in on USA Jobs? And there are so many other ways to serve. I've had people ask me if I would come back into government. And, right now I am so um, frustrated by what I see, because as a change agent, I know I have no ability to make it better. So what I plan to use is my voice as an outside change agent and remind people what happened this year is not normal. It is not right. And frankly, and this is not a popular sentiment, Aaron, and people get mad at me when I say it.
Give me the hot
What
take.
happened this I'm sorry, what happened this year is absolutely the culmination of many years of mistreatment and abuse of civil servants by both sides of the aisle. For far too long, civil servants are often ignored and maligned by political appointees. That is not how it used to be. There used to be a good synergy and understanding that we were there to help them execute their mission and their policies, but to do it within the law and to also explain why things work the way they did. And I plan to continue to use my platform. Right now, it's LinkedIn, but I want to figure out another creative way to keep myself in the game, at least to pass along the lessons I learned and make sure that when we do rebuild, we are doing it as intelligently and as thoughtfully as possible. My greatest fear is that in 2028, we're going to get a lot of people that come back into government as appointees that think they have all the answers, and that could not be farther from the truth. It kind of circles back to what we were just talking about in the beginning of the podcast, right? Go to the people that do the work and
Right.
ask them what the challenges are. And that has been absent for at least 10 years in government.
Yeah. I've told people this before. I don't think any government employee is going to say, no, we don't need more efficiency.
Great. It's how you do it, right? I,
The
I
issue has
just don't,
always been over implementation. Yeah.
and I can tell you, I had conversations under both, Democrats and Republicans. Tell me exactly what you want to do, and I will tell you the legal way to get there. I will ask the questions that maybe you didn't think about simply because you're only here for a short amount of time. And when I say no, or when I say maybe do it this way, it's not because I think that this administration's favorite term is we're blockers. It's not because I'm a blocker. It's because I'm using my experience and my hindsight and my years of public service to help you implement things that are important, but to do it in the way that will outlast all of us, right? I think
Right.
everything we saw this year is going to be overturned. All that happened this year was a huge mess. The exodus of so many smart, committed people is going to haunt us for decades.
Yeah.
And
And
I'm worried about that.
even if it doesn't get overturned, you can't cut forever,
Oh, absolutely not.
So it'll snap
Yeah.
back at some point once they realize, oh, there is such a thing as a minimum viable product, you
Right.
know?
And you also need to embrace, another thing I'm passionate about this year, and it's not just because I'm on the other side now as a consultant. The contractors and consultants that help the government achieve their mission, they are part of the process and the success. And what has happened this year has also harmed so many people that dedicated their life to government contracting, because they really wanted, they wanted the flexibilities, or maybe they were retired feds that wanted a second act career. And the fact that we just kind of came in and Doge, canceled contracts without understanding what their role was or why they were necessary, again, is something that I think is going to harm the way we deliver services until we course correct. And again, as the people person, and Aaron, you can speak to this because you were at GSA when I was there. I'm not just all whatever the employees want, they get. It has to be about how are we delivering the mission and how are we doing it in a way that is humane and thoughtful. And everything that happened this year is the absolute opposite of how it should have been done.
Well, one of my other concerns that you bring up when you mention the contractors is it's flexibility, true. It's second careers also. It's also one of the best training grounds of future federal employees.
Absolutely.
A lot of people go to Deloitte and then they go on to be killer employees for the federal government. You're sort of hurting your farm system.
Really are.
Yeah,
And that's definitely an important farm system, along with like our veterans that usually want to come in and continue serving, but in a different way when they no longer are serving in uniform. Same for rising college students or mid-career people that decide to switch and want to bring their talents. We have somehow systematically alienated all of our farm teams. And again, it didn't have to be this way. And I'm really hopeful that there will be a way in the future that myself and others can offer just some advice and guidance because I'm fine with passing the baton. I had a great career, but I still also care about the people left behind. And I think that's another point I would love to explore with you. You know, people really don't understand the lack of good leadership that was left behind at both the career and the political level. Most of my inbox is filled with feds saying, I just wish I had a leader around that would be honest with us, share information, create a space where we can be honest with them and not be afraid to stand up. And that to me is the very base level of what any leader should do. So the fact that that is absent right now in the civil service should be ringing five alarm bells for everyone.
yeah. It's probably somewhere, but not nearly as common. And I think a part of that is because when they were making the cuts, because of the designation of the position, leaders are generally easier to cut from
Mm-hmm.
federal employee services. So they're going to go first.
Right.
So I wouldn't even say lack of good leadership, lack of leadership entirely.
Experienced leadership.
Yes.
Some
Yeah.
people were
A
put
lot of
into
them went
jobs they were
first.
not ready for. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's not their fault.
Right.
But you know, I also think about so many of the good things we accomplished at GSA that were turned around unnecessarily. One of the things I'm most proud about is the work we did to show how you could have a hybrid or remote workforce that would ultimately make us better employers, like because we could recruit for talent, not location.
Right.
And all of that was just dismantled. And we really were intentional about bringing in talent that could add to our already amazing workforce. And some of those people just happen to live in more rural parts of the country or parts of the country that didn't have a large federal presence, like not near a large metropolitan area. And it's foolhardy to think you have to work in an urban area to serve. You should be able to work anywhere. You know, 85% of federal employees are outside of DC. And we should embrace that because people should see their government in action.
Well, not only that, but there have been plenty of studies that show that your services are better when the people doing it represent the population in
Yep.
terms of demography and types of background. So, an example I could bring up to this is at one point at GSA, we were helping another agency, Department of Labor, I believe, figure out how to provide better benefit enrollment for people who are working coal mines in Kentucky.
Mhm.
And unless you've been to Kentucky and worked in Kentucky and know, like, the average coal miner in Kentucky, how old they are, what their background is, you would think, oh, I could just fix a web page. No, you need good, clean paper forms that are accessible at the
Yeah.
post office. Has nothing to do with education levels or anything. That's just how some people like to do business.
Absolutely. And you got to meet people where they're at. And I think that's a great example because, again, no one would say we shouldn't have the government be more efficient. No one would argue that maybe we need to clean up our web presence and make things more streamlined, right? But at the end of the day, you have to meet people where they're at. And some people are still going to prefer to do a hard copy form
Absolutely.
for whatever reason. You know, when I think about that, I had the privilege of working at USDA for a bit in my career, and I worked for rural development. And, you know, people often forget in some parts of the country, broadband and the ability to get on the internet is still not an option.
Yes.
You know, people still rely on the mail or doing things by hand or in person. And that doesn't mean that they are against technology. It just means we haven't caught up to have the entire country have access to those types of
Yeah,
systems.
it's not an option for them.
Exactly.
But let's flip it and go positive for a second. We
Okay.
have, I know you mentioned sort of the easy punching bag that a federal employee
Mhm.
has been in the past years in the media and whatnot. One thing that I like to subscribe to that is we're sometimes not allowed to tell our story, which is severely lacking. Because like you, the smartest people working on the most difficult problems I've met in the federal government. And now we have a lot of those people in the job market, out and about in the world, or starting their own businesses.
Mhm.
Uh, well, let me hand you the microphone to tell a bit of the federal story. What makes the special sauce that people would want out of this new market of employees or businesses?
I think that, wow, that's a great question. So I do think we are in a season of plenty when it comes to job seekers. There are so many people that are seeking their next opportunity. And I don't think people outside of the public sector truly appreciate and understand the quality of the employees that are up for grabs right now. Now, having said that, I also know how incredibly difficult all the changes in 2025 have been to the job market in general. So if I had the chance to kind of be an employer whisperer, I would tell them, talk to the feds. They're the ones that know how to work hard under any circumstance. They are constantly dealing with change and last minute interruptions, and they are committed. And specifically, when I think about those feds that are out there starting their businesses, um, they may not look like traditional entrepreneurs, but boy, do they know exactly how to set up a system that works, make constant improvements as they continue to grow, and to pivot when necessary. I think that's one of the best qualities I learned as a Fed is to be open-minded and flexible and not be afraid to change course when you see what you had planned all along just wasn't working. I really am hopeful that 2026 will bring full employment back to all the feds that lost their positions, along with the contractors, and that we will see a real rebound because it's about time, in my mind, that people that actually understand and do the work are allowed to actually execute and are finally heard from, right?
Be
There's been
amazing.
a lot, right? It's
Yeah,
crazy. There's been so much discussion this year about merit. And as a human capital expert in government, I can tell you the merit system exists for a reason. And there aren't people, tens of thousands of people that got their jobs because of who they know. Those are called
yeah,
political appointees.
yeah.
What we do in federal government as human capital people is we do look at the job announcement and we put it against the qualities of people that apply. And I got to tell you, the one thing that people underestimate is how many people want to be federal employees. We would open a job at say the GS 9 or 11 level, which is, mid-range for careers, and we could get 2 or 3 thousand resumes in
Easily.
the span of a week easily,
Yeah,
right? And these are people that see they want to work in a job that actually has something tangible they can point to as success. And working for the federal government is still an honor and a privilege that so many people want to do and want to serve. So imagine one day all of these people magically are in the job market. You're getting super smart, super committed people with experience that know how to work under tight circumstances with limited resources and still really care. I
yeah.
mean, what's not to love in an employee like that?
So, if I could put in a little plug for you, Traci, I will say you are on LinkedIn. You're easy to find.
Yes.
It's just your name. It's a good follow. Lots of insights. People who are listening to this should look you up.
I would love that. Yes. And I
And
do love to stay connected with not only former feds, but anyone that's interested in making sure, we are all collectively pushing to rebuild a government that works for all Americans.
yes. And at this point, Traci, I'd like to thank you for joining us on the podcast. Thank you so much. And from us here at Ishmael Interactive, fly Eagles fly.
Go birds.